With that said, let's dive into a deep or deeper question of the day before we dive into the main topic, of course. And that question for you, Jonathan, we'll talk about a little bit. Is hitting your kid in any situation child abuse, or every situation child abuse?
No,
Why?
no. Excuse me. Um, I suppose I should clarify, right? Like, what do you mean by hitting?
So, well, the reason why I stated it that way, so like anytime a parent puts physical harm, like smacks them, punches them in the arm, anytime that happens, we're setting a standard first. So, anytime that happens, would that be child abuse? And you said no, and
No.
I would also say no, but obviously we have to go deeper to okay, what exactly you qualify as child abuse, and what do you exactly qualify as justified punishment in terms of smacking your child?
So there's a couple things. And it's funny that you say this because my dad has just preached like 3 sermons on discipline and how we're to be disciplined and how a just and moral parent is to discipline their child. One of the things that the Bible is very explicit about is spanking. Um, and spanking your child in the appropriate manner is the best thing for them. Um, it, I could quote a bunch of scriptures about it. That there's obviously the one spare the rod, spoil the child. I think that one's misused and misapplied sometimes. But there's a study that I can send you. I can ask my dad for it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was a very famous study that we actually talked about in my psychology class. Um, as it because it was coming out that the study was a bad study, uh, during the time I was taking the psychology class and during even the section that we were talking about raising children. And what this study had claimed, and this was a study that was standing for like 14 plus years, and it said that spanking your child is bad for them. But they didn't do the study right. It wasn't conducted very well, and they missed a lot of it. And what they found out when they revamped the study and like applied a slightly more rigorous standard is the children who got spanked appropriately turned out to be the most productive citizens in every single category, in every single standard, by every single metric. They made more money, they were married for longer, they had more children, they were got higher educations, they contributed back to their society more by every metric. So
Okay.
no, spanking
Yeah, send me that
not
study, so I want to get in the habit of putting all
yep,
research links
yep,
for the
I will.
podcast. But yeah, go ahead.
Um yeah, so that alone proves that spanking is not child abuse.
And what can you
There's a
define what you mean by appropriate spanking?
yeah. So the way that the Bible lays it out and the way that in this to have the best outcome, this is the way you do it. Just like with our legal system, it must the correction and um the rectification must happen instantaneously, as fast as possible. Science has shown 3 seconds. Within 3 seconds of the infraction, you have to have told the child, "This is what you did wrong, and this is what you're getting punished for." And so when it comes to spanking, excuse me, when you do something wrong, immediately say, "This is what you just did wrong, and now there's gonna be a punishment." And so for me, it looked like I infracted whatever I was doing, and my parents told me to go up to my room, or not my room, the office. And then they'd come up, and what they did that I give them credit for is they never spanked me when they were still angry. So if I did something very egregious, like one time broke a very expensive vase because I was goofing around and doing something I knew I shouldn't have been doing, because I never got spanked for doing something, which is another key thing. I always got spanked for disobedience. So when I was jumping on the couch, they said, "Stop jumping on the couch." I kept jumping on the couch and I broke the expensive vase. I wasn't getting spanked for jumping on the couch. I was getting spanked for disobeying a direct order from my parents. Anyways, when you're angry, you don't discipline your child. You calm yourself down first. If you can't get yourself under control, how are you gonna get them under control? Once my parents were under control, I got spanked, and I was told, "This is why you're getting spanked again." So I was very clear on this is what I was getting spanked for, and then afterwards, they told me that they still loved me, and they bound up the wounds afterwards, which is the biblical context for it. When you don't do all of those things, that is when I think you encroach upon child abuse, right? If you're doing something wrong and you just come up and smack your kid on the back of the head, that's none of that is right. They don't know what they're getting hit for. They're there's a lot of miscommunications there. That's an improper hit. You're supposed to I always got spanked on the butt. That was it. That's the only place that you got spanked in, was on the butt, because you're not gonna do any sort of lasting physical damage. Like, if you smack someone on the arm repeatedly over and over and over again, aggressively, you can cause some serious damage. Can't do that on the butt. So there's a and this is what my dad said. You also never got I never got hit by a hand. This is a point that my dad made. Hands are made for loving and caressing. You don't hit with your hands.
So, honestly, a lot of the things you said are very interesting, very interesting. I'll come at this from my approach. I understand why people would say like, or people are wary of like smacking your kid. Obviously, a lot of this comes from either like a trauma or you know a circumstance in the past where you're completely off-putted. Those that's just like human nature. When they go through something that they can't kind of conceptualize, they're going to just steer away from it. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, because
Yeah,
like for me, I was hit as a kid, obviously. Now I live in a very traditional islander culture, life, family oriented stuff. So both Samoans and Jamaicans would hit their kids, and I'm both, right? So Samoans can get pretty violent, but they're trying to calm down with this newer generation. Shout out to he's a pretty calm guy. But also like Jamaicans as well. And my dad back in the day, my family was very, very disoriented. And my dad back in the day was going through a lot, of course, and a lot of when he would go, he definitely fed into the anger. He definitely went too far because he would hit me with a belt and it would like whip on my back and it would be like I got I'm not gonna say what I was about to say. It would have been a tasteless joke. Nobody would have appreciated it. But that would happen. I would go to my school and my friends would go like, "Bro, what is these bruises on your back?" I'm like, "Bro, I got cooked, bro." Obviously, as a kid, that was very devastating, of course. And my dad learned from his actions and matter of fact, my half siblings, he'd never hit to them. So he went from one extreme to another extreme because
yeah,
my sister, my full blooded sister says our half sister, and that she's kind of spoiled because of how our father treats her. So
sure.
there's definitely a nuance with this. So with that said, the reason why I wanted to point that out is to kind of enlighten my perspective as an individual that went through spankings or whatever.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's important for the audience because some people think, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, all that junk. But with that said, I can conceptualize. At first, like if I didn't have my nuanced thinking, I would have been like, oh, I'm never hitting my kids. But after like maturing, growing up, you realize one, I stand by this fact: pain exists because it's the ultimate deterrent. That's what I truly believe. We wouldn't have pain receptors we wouldn't have pain receptors if they weren't to tell us that we're doing something wrong. We have pain for a reason. They're the ultimate
Yeah,
deterrent for like every single animal that exists. So pain is necessary. Obviously, it depends on how you utilize that pain. And a lot of things what Jonathan said is very appropriate. You should never feed into your anger when you're punishing your kid. You should obviously show the more compassion and love than the punishment, because a lot of families that are doing like child abuse is prevalent is all they see is punishment, all they see is smacking and getting hit
yes,
with a belt. That's all they see. They don't see the compassion, they don't see the love. So you
yeah,
definitely need it there, and it needs to be controlled. Obviously, you don't want to be like my family went back in the day where they would just grab anything and just start. Hey man, we're swinging. Hey, electric cord, swinging. Hanger, swinging. Hey, anything in my hand, swinging. You don't want to be like that. It needs to be controlled. They need to understand because sometimes when kids especially they don't know how to rationale logic yet. So the best way you're going to deter them is going to be brief punishment to associate action bad. That's the simplest way you can associate a bad action is pain
Yeah.
associated with the bad action. So
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, but it's not quite that simple. As you said, kids can't rationalize, right? So, let's use the example that I had before. There's the concept of, like, the Pavlovian training, right? Training the dog. I'm not a dog. I'm a person. I'm a human. I'm sorry for all those people out there that are like, "Oh, my child is my dog." No, it's not. Your dog is your dog, and dogs are great, but they're not your children. By the same metric, I'm not a dog. I don't wanna be trained like a dog. If I'm bouncing on the couch and then my parent says, "Stop bouncing on the couch. Keep bouncing on the couch. Knock the vase over." And then immediately, like you said, someone starts swinging at me, and I just get hit, and I feel pain. I don't know what I'm getting in trouble for. As a child, I can't rationalize which of the infractions did I get in trouble for. Was it bouncing on the couch? Was it breaking the vase? Or was it disobeying my parents? Maybe I'll associate all 3. And when I begin to associate all 3 like that, and there's no initial go up to the office. My parent calms down. They come up, tell me again what I'm getting in trouble for, apply the discipline, and then bind up that wound because this concept comes from the wounds of God are faithful. He is faithful to wound, but also to bind up. And so the binding up is the most important part, which is something you don't get with the Pavlovian cognitive behavioral therapy kind of approaches. When you do it like that, there are higher chances that you begin to fear your parents because they're not disciplining you appropriately. And I don't know what your particular experience has been, but I know other people that resent their parents because they got disciplined physically. But there's another concept, there's something else that happens, which has this kind of same outcome, and it's resenting towards the parents. If your parents hit you unjustly and they don't do it in the correct manner, you begin to resent them. But if you never get disciplined either, if you're the child that never gets disciplined, never hears the word no, you will also eventually begin to resent your parents because there's a key part of the relationship between children and parents that's missing. That's discipline and correction. Because parents, just as our heavenly Father, I think this is a particularly fatherly role. Our heavenly Father has a goal for us. He has something that he wants us to. He has a vision for our future that is better than our own because he's wiser and smarter. Just as our physical father, they're typically, not always, wiser and smarter because they have more years, they have age. There's the owl of Minerva flies at night, and that is the owl of Minerva signifies wisdom and flies at dusk rather, and that's age. It's referring to age. And so our parents have a better vision for our future than we do, and that's why we are corrected. When I'm jumping on the couch, I'm gonna break the couch or break the vase. The parents have a better vision for my future than to break that vase. It's a very simplistic explanation, but that's what it is. And if they don't do that for you, then that's a key function that they're supposed to play that they're not doing, and that will also lead to resentment. The Bible, once again, says, "Parents, when you correct your children, provoke them not to anger." And provoking them to anger is causing them to resent you. When you're doing it, when you're doing the disciplining thing and you're not doing it right, you will provoke your child to anger. And that's what we're not supposed to do.
yeah, like I said, a lot of these situations, of course, are very hard, very nuanced. And if you're just one of those parents to kind of provide y'all a alternative, if you're one of those parents and you just refuse to put your hand on your kid for whatever reason, which is perfectly fine, I still think you should abide by the idea that just talking to a child is not going to solve your circumstance. It's not going to help them understand because they can only understand so much based off their limited experience and their, you know, more simplistic brain function at the end of the day. So pain, I believe, still needs to play a part. And there's other ways you can go about it. Obviously, you can make them a stand on the wall and do a wall sit. You're gonna get pain from a wall sit right there. You can make them do push-ups. There are other ways to kind of abide by a sense of pain so they understand that the action that I just committed, and this is what people do back in the military. This would, if you're in sports, hey man, run laps. Like, there's a reason why all these things happen. Running laps is not going to help you be a better football player. You're running laps because you were bad, you sucked for
You
whatever
done
reason,
screwed up.
and you, yeah, exactly. You're not doing push-ups in the military because it's going to make you stronger. You're doing push-ups because you screwed up. So there are other facets of pain that you could use as well in that are obviously needs to be controlled, but that are different, an alternative if you don't want to put your hands on your kids. Just because you don't put your hands on your kids doesn't make you a bad parent, but trying to talk with your kid like you're equals, you're towing the line of bad parent right there. You and your kid are not
Yeah, there's
equals. I'm just
have
saying.
you do you know who John Crist is?
John Chris, no.
So he's a comedian. He's pretty funny. I think you'd actually kinda like him. But he's got this joke that he does now, it's one of his new jokes about his sister at a Chili's, like, they're having a family dinner, and he's like, "Man, and the kids, they're just bad kids." Like, they try to say, like, "Oh, they're rambunctious," or all this, but no, they're just bad kids. Kid breaks a crayon, John at Chili's freaks out, starts whining and crying, and it's hilarious watching all the different people in my family. My sister, she doesn't believe in looking down on kids because that's judgmental. So she literally gets on her hands and knees talking to the kids equal. What do you need? What can I help with? My other sister, she's got rubbing crystals together, trying to what is it, manifest no tears. And then and then me, I'm just sitting here, it's like, man, someone's gotta hit that child. If that's you, if any of you are like that, if you ever see me in a restaurant and your child's freaking out, wink at me, I'll come over and I'll hit your child. It's just it's ridiculous that we think that we can talk to kids like equals. Like, even me, I'm not an adult. I mean, I guess I am an adult technically, but I'm 20 years old. Even I'm not the same. Someone who's older than me, they can talk to me to a greater extent, but there comes a point in time when somebody who's older and wiser than me, such as my dad often, and he'll say, "Listen, I know what's best for you." At my age, I can decide if I wanna take his advice now. Most of the time, I'm gonna opt to do it because he's smarter and wiser than me. If I was 12, it's a different story. It's and less of a story the younger and younger I go back. There's a certain point where we simply defer to people who are wiser than us and smarter than us. And
Exactly.
if you try to have that conversation with a young kid about, "Listen to me, I'm smarter than you. You should do what I say." At some point you say, "No, you don't have that option. You're going to do what I think is better for you." And you can't do that to other people's kids. I mean, sometimes you can. It depends on the relationship you have with the parents. But when
Yeah.
it's your own kids, you shouldn't be trying to rationalize a logical argument through the Socratic method with